On his deathbed, Lenin attempted to ensure unified leadership within his party. After his death in 1924, Lev Trotsky, his most trusted follower, was disposed of by Stalin, who eventually forced him into exile to Central Asia, Turkey, and finally Mexico, where Trotsky would be assassinated. Lenin had condemned Stalin before his death, yet Stalin managed to suppress and crush any opposition and consolidated his power. He would become the Soviet Union's dictator until his death in 1953, ruthless, without any regard for human lives and with the deaths of millions to his name. So, what happened between Trotsky and Stalin, the Soviet Union and the Communist Party following Lenin's death? As soon as the Bolsheviks under Lenin achieved victory in the Russian Civil War and overcame the economic difficulties and famine, Lenin was stricken by multiple strokes. From 1922 until his death in 1924, he was a very ill man. He had not given a clear and unanimous protocol for his succession. At most, he ensured that his succession crisis would be confusing and lengthy. In essence, he hoped for some form of collective leadership that he did not define, creating an impossible situation. In the months before his third stroke, which robbed him of the ability to speak, he dictated several important articles and letters that would become the political testament of the Communist Party. The most important point was Lenin's conclusion about the victory of socialism in one country, namely Russia. On the 4th of January 1923, Lenin dictated another letter that was critical about Stalin, that the committee should consider removing him from his position. Lenin requested that after his death this letter would be read at the party congress. Vladimir Lenin passed away on the 21st of January 1924. That evening the Central Committee of the Communist Party came together in a special meeting. The party stated that Lenin's physical death was not the death of his ideology. It was thought that Trotsky, probably overestimating his chance of being elected as a new party leader, left Moscow 3 days before Lenin's death. In reality, he left the city to recover from an illness. Stalin sent Trotsky a telegram after Lenin's death, giving the wrong date of the funeral. The funeral was dominated by another candidate, the Georgian Stalin. He was playing a tactical game, attempting to gain control over the party. The succession struggle had begun. Joseph Stalin, born in 1878, was arrested 6 times between 1902 and 1913. He escaped from exile twice. The February Revolution ended his last penalty. From 1912 onwards, he was included in Lenin's Central Committee, while Lenin was ensuring that the committee was filled with loyal and colorless types. When Lenin and the other Bolsheviks returned to Russia from their exile in 1917, Stalin faded to the background. Oddly enough, Stalin's position of power after Lenin's death was thanks to his lack of treading to the forefront and yearning for a position of power. All the tasks and functions that Lenin had given him after 1917 required a cunning personality rather than imagination, diligence instead of flair. While Trotsky was reaping recognition as a Soviet diplomat and the army's commander among his troops, while Iron Felix Dzerzhinsky sowed fear and awe as the head of the new Cheka, the secret police, and while other leading party members were tasked with getting the economy back on track, Stalin focused himself on normal tasks such as recruitment, promotion, and degrading other party members. A byproduct of his work was the accumulation of an enormous amount of power, which only started to worry Lenin when it was too late to do anything about it. To Stalin, it became clear that Trotsky, who had a strong claim to the leadership of the party, had to be held in check. Stalin's first tactical move was to form an alliance, a troika, with 2 other contenders and notable Soviet politicians, Lev Kamenev and Grigory Zinoviev. This alliance prevented Trotsky from succeeding Lenin as the first minister. Probably one of the least colorful Soviet officials, Alexei Rykov, was elected for this post. The same alliance aided Stalin when Lenin's letter denouncing Stalin was read at the 13th Party Congress. Trotsky was not elected as the successor of Lenin. The next step was to attempt to kick him out of the party. Trotsky, after all these setbacks, was extremely combative. Trotsky and Stalin had a history of conflict. Their first large conflict was about the organization and the tactics of the Red Army, then about the internal party democracy, and when Stalin became general secretary, he made a habit of directly appointing secretaries instead of having them elected, causing another reason for struggle. An issue that may seem theoretical, but was at the core of the conflict between Trotsky and Stalin, was the direction of the Bolshevik Party and its communist ideology. The majority of Bolsheviks were convinced that communism within Russia was something that could be achieved. Trotsky claimed that communism in an agrarian country, which Russia still was only possible if there was an international revolution by the proletariat in developed countries. According to Trotsky, a Russia attempting to build a communist state on its own would not be able to defend itself against the conservative, capitalist European countries. The most important task of the party was encouraging other revolutions in other countries. Exporting the revolution, so to say. Trotsky regarded violence as the most important tool in politics. No wonder he was commander of the Red Army during the Russian Civil War. In May 1924, during the 13th Party Congress, Zinoviev recalled the entire list of disputes between Trotsky and Stalin and framed them as Trotsky's conflicts with the entire party. He demanded an open apology. Trotsky refused to apologize and rebutted. He published a pamphlet, The Lessons of October, which indirectly claimed that he was the mastermind behind the Russian Revolution in 1917 and downplayed the role of the Bolshevik Party. The effects were twofold. They impaired Zinoviev and Kamenev, who publicly opposed the revolution in 1917, but because Trotsky downplayed the role of the party, the members of the party stuck together closer, and, as a result, Stalin's position was strengthened. The last round of the succession struggle was in 1925 when the Politburo forced Trotsky to resign as the Minister of Defense, making use of the phenomenon known as party discipline. His supporters lost their positions in the army. Trotsky slowly became isolated. The fight against Stalin continued, though it became an uphill battle. Several local party organizations asked the Central Committee to remove Trotsky from his position. The Armenian communists demanded that Trotsky should relieve his command of the Red Army. In 1927, Trotsky was removed from the Politburo, forced into exile to Alma-Ata in Kazakhstan. In 1929, he was sent in exile to Turkey. Eventually, he fled to Mexico in 1937, where he was assassinated in 1940. Most of his followers would die in the gulags, sent there by Stalin and the secret Soviet police, NKVD, which started a full-fledged crackdown on Trotskyists once Stalin consolidated his power. After Trotsky was forced into exile, Stalin was left with multiple prominent Soviet officials attempting to prevent him from grabbing power, among which Bukharin, Tomsky and Rykov. Next week, the power struggle between the party continues between these men. Stalin would eventually be able to consolidate his power, but only after purging all of the old Soviet officials, commanders of the army, civil servants, and over 1 million men, women and children. Thank you very much for watching. This is the first video in a series that I am doing on Stalin and the way that he consolidated his power in the Soviet Union, mainly because it's an extremely terrifying phenomenon. The time that I'm speaking about is from 1924 of Lenin's death until 1940 when the Great Purges ended. The video is divided in threefold. This video was Trotsky versus Stalin. The next video will be about Stalin that attempts to consolidate his power before the Great Purges that took off after Kirov was murdered in 1934. So the next two videos will be one about Stalin before the Great Purges and one about the Great Purges themselves. That one will be long. It was fascinating to research, truly terrifying though, horrifying, absolutely. The sources will be in the description, and honestly I can recommend reading these sources mainly because there is a huge disparity between the sources that were available before 1990 when the Soviet registers opened and afterward. Lots of new information about the purges was released after the Soviet Union fell, and you can honestly see the disparity between the sources from before 1990 and the sources afterwards. Moscow 1937 is a very good book, very interesting, and I've had some general Russian literature in order to, envisage the entire situation that this took place in. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next week, and until next Friday.